I had a little problem with Tim Cook. Treated you very good, but now I hear you're building all over India.
Apple just ditched China to manufacture in India, and they're not playing around. We're talking 3 mega factories and a massive production boost. Clearly, this was not Trump's plan, and he is even making threats at Apple.
I don't want you building in India.
What's Apple's next move? Let's get right into it. The tariff bombshell that shook Silicon Valley. Donald Trump just delivered what can only be described as the most devastating blow to Apple's global strategy, and Tim Cook's response? Complete and utter silence. We're talking about a bombshell threat that sent Apple's stock plummeting and exposed the shocking reality of how dependent America's most valuable company has become on foreign manufacturing.
It would be more. It would be also Samsung and anybody that makes that product. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. So anybody that makes that product.
This isn't just another political spat. This is Trump declaring war on Apple's entire India manufacturing strategy, threatening to slap a devastating 25% tariff on every iPhone not made in America. And the most infuriating part, Apple's stock immediately crashed too. 5 to 3% air the announcement, proving just how terrified Wall Street is of Trump's trade war tactics. But here's where this story gets absolutely explosive. Trump didn't just wake up one morning and decide to threaten Apple. This has been brewing for weeks, ever since he had what he called a little problem with Tim Cook. The backstory here is absolutely infuriating when you understand the full context of their relationship and how Trump feels personally betrayed by Apple's strategic pivot to India.
To him, Tim, you're my friend. I treated you very good. You're coming in with $500 billion, but now I hear you're building all over India. I don't want you building in India.
The brutal reality is that Trump essentially told the CEO of the world's most valuable company to his face that he doesn't want Apple manufacturing in India, period. And when you dig deeper into what Trump actually said, it gets even more outrageous. This wasn't just a policy disagreement. This was Trump making it personal, framing Apple's business decisions as a personal affront to their relationship.
You put up with all the plants that you built in China for years. Now you got to build us. We're not interested in you building in India.
Think about the audacity here. Trump is literally telling Apple that they are tolerating their Chinese manufacturing for decades. They now owe America their manufacturing loyalty. It's like he's treating global supply chain decisions as personal favors that can be called in whenever politically convenient. The shocking entitlement in that statement reveals everything about how Trump views corporate America, as vassals who should bend to his political will rather than pursue their own business interests. But the most shocking part isn't just the threat itself, it's the timing and the numbers behind. Apple's massive India expansion that Trump is trying to destroy. The scale of what he's threatening to obliterate is staggering beyond comprehension. Apple has been absolutely crushing it in India, with production reaching a staggering $22 billion in the fiscal year ending March 2025. That's a mind-blowing 60% increase year over year. We're talking about 20% of the world's iPhones now being manufactured in India, and Trump wants to kill all of that with a single tariff threat. The infuriating part is how this exposes the complete hypocrisy of Apple's supposed commitment to diversification. For years, Tim Cook has been preaching about reducing dependence on China, moving manufacturing around the globe, and building a more resilient supply chain. He's positioned Apple as a forward-thinking company that learns from global disruptions and adapts accordingly. But the moment Trump threatens their bottom line, Apple has refused to issue any official statement whatsoever, essentially leaving their Indian partners and the thousands of workers they employ hanging in the balance. The devastating numbers behind Apple's India expansion make Trump's threat even more outrageous. We're talking about exports from India reaching $17.4 billion in the fiscal year ending March 2025, with Apple's total sales in India surging 33% to almost $8 billion in fiscal 2024. This isn't some experimental side project. This is a core component of Apple's global strategy that Trump wants to destroy with the stroke of a pen.
Look, I'm a very flexible person. I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible. And you have to be. You just can't have a wall and you'll only go. No, sometimes you have to go around it, under it, or above it. There'll be maybe things coming up.
But here's where Trump's strategy gets absolutely devastating. He's not just targeting Apple. He's made it crystal clear that this applies to Samsung and any other smartphone manufacturer. This is a full-scale assault on the entire global smartphone manufacturing ecosystem, and Apple just happens to be the biggest target with the most to lose. Trump is essentially trying to rewrite the rules of global commerce through threats and intimidation. The explosive economics behind this threat are staggering when you break them down. Manufacturing costs in India are already 5 to 8% higher than China, but with Trump's 25% tariff, even India-made iPhones would still be cheaper than US-made ones. The brutal math: labor costs in India are $230 per month compared to $2,900 in California. That's a 13-fold difference that would make US manufacturing absolutely catastrophic for Apple's profit margins. Industry analysts are calling Trump's demands a complete fantasy. Wedbush analyst Dan Ives stated flat out, "We believe the concept of Apple producing iPhones in the US is a fairy tale that is not feasible, and when you look at the numbers, it's easy to see why. Estimates suggest US-made iPhones could cost between $1,500 and $3,500 per unit, compared to current retail prices of around $1,000. We're talking about potentially tripling the cost of the world's most popular smartphone." The shocking reality is that Apple has painted itself into a corner. They've spent years building up their India operations, with plans to produce 30 million iPhones in 2025 and scale up to over 60 million by 2026. Tim Cook himself has publicly stated that the majority of iPhones sold in the US will soon have India as their country of origin. And now Trump is essentially demanding they torch their entire strategy. Apple has been desperately trying to navigate this maze of trade restrictions, only to find themselves directly in Trump's crosshairs, regardless of where they manufacture. Apple's Indian empire under siege. What makes Trump's tariff threat so absolutely devastating is the sheer scale of Apple's commitment to India that he's trying to obliterate. We're not talking about some small side operation. Apple has built what can only be described as a manufacturing empire in India, and the numbers are staggering beyond belief. The scope of Apple's Indian operations reads like something out of a corporate expansion fantasy. Foxconn, Apple's biggest contract manufacturer, is readying a massive 300-acre iPhone-making campus in India with dormitories for 30,000 employees. This isn't just a factory. It's essentially a small city dedicated entirely to iPhone production, complete with housing, dining facilities, and recreational areas for workers. The scale is absolutely mind-boggling when you consider that this is just one facility in Apple's growing Indian network. The explosive expansion doesn't stop there. Foxconn is investing a mind-blowing $2.56 billion in a plant near Bengaluru, with plans to assemble 100,000 iPhones by December 2025, and they're not stopping there. Expansion plans include Tamil Nadu and Telangana for AirPods production as well. We're talking about a complete ecosystem of Apple manufacturing that spans multiple Indian states and employs hundreds of thousands of workers. But here's where the story gets absolutely infuriating. Trump's timing couldn't be worse for the thousands of workers whose livelihoods depend on Apple's India operations. The expansion is projected to create 600,000 new jobs by the end of 2025, and now all of that is hanging in the balance because of one man's protectionist tantrum. These aren't just statistics. We're talking about real families whose economic futures depend on Apple's continued commitment to Indian manufacturing. The brutal reality of what Trump is threatening becomes clear when you look at the individual facilities. Tata Electronics has acquired stakes in manufacturing facilities and is now capable of producing about 5 million iPhones annually, while Apple now has 14 suppliers across India, with half located in Tamil Nadu. This represents years of relationship building, infrastructure investment, and workforce training that Trump wants to render worthless overnight.
But I had an understanding with him that he wouldn't be doing this. He said he's going to India to build plants. I said, that's okay to go to India, but you're not going to sell into here without tariff.
The brutal reality is that Trump is essentially holding Apple's entire Indian workforce hostage. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about real people whose families depend on these jobs, factory workers who moved from rural areas to industrial centers, engineers who specialized in Apple's manufacturing processes, and entire communities that have grown up around these facilities. And the most outrageous part, Apple has privately assured Indian officials that their manufacturing plans remain intact despite Trump's threats, but they won't say a word publicly to defend their workers or their partners. The scale of Apple's Indian operations is absolutely staggering when you break down the numbers by facility and region. In Tamil Nadu alone, Foxconn's facility employs thousands of workers, predominantly women, working in shifts around the clock to meet global iPhone demand. Recent reports indicate that these facilities have been ramping up production significantly, with some operating at near maximum capacity. But Trump's threat exposes something even more shocking about Apple's strategy. The company aims to source all US-bound iPhones from India by 2025, essentially making India the primary manufacturing base for the American market. Think about the audacity of that plan. Apple was essentially planning to flip the script entirely, moving from China-centric manufacturing to India-centric manufacturing for US consumers. This represents one of the largest supply chain shiz in corporate history, and Trump wants to kill it dead. The explosive irony here is that Apple's India expansion was partly driven by Trump's own previous tariffs on Chinese goods. Apple was literally responding to Trump's trade war with China by diversifying to India, and now he's punishing them for following through on that diversification. It's like a twisted game where Trump keeps moving the goalpost every time Apple tries to adapt to his demands. The devastating economics of Trump's threat become even clearer when you look at the investment commitments already made by Apple's manufacturing partners. India's government has provided $2.7 billion in subsidies for electronics and semiconductors, specifically designed to attract companies like Apple. State governments have offered additional incentives, including capital subsidies, electricity duty exemptions, and employment incentives that make India an attractive manufacturing destination. The shocking transformation of India's role in Apple's supply chain is evident in the production numbers. In 2024, Apple produced around 43 million iPhones in India, with about 13 million consumed domestically and the rest exported. By March 2025, exports from India reached a staggering $17.4 billion, underscoring India's emergence as a major export hub rather than just a local manufacturing center. But here's where the public reaction gets absolutely infuriating. Social media has exploded with criticism of the Indian government's response, or rather, their complete lack of response. Users are asking why Prime Minister Modi hasn't said a single word to defend India's massive investment in Apple's manufacturing ecosystem, despite the country bending over backwards to attract these investments. One particularly brutal social media post captured the sentiment perfectly. Donald Trump openly threatens to impose a 25% tariff on iPhones made in India, calling out Apple for manufacturing here. This is a direct attack on India's investments. Why is Modi government silent? This post gained significant traction, with over 1,300 views and dozens of interactions, showing the level of public frustration with the government's silence. The explosive nature of public anger is evident in the engagement numbers across multiple platforms. Posts criticizing the government's silence are getting tens of thousands of views and hundreds of interactions, showing just how much this issue has struck a nerve with ordinary Indians who see Apple's expansion as a validation of their country's manufacturing capabilities and technological advancement. Another post went even further, stating, "At this point, Trump is literally humiliating Modi, and because of Modi's failed foreign policies, India's image keeps getting tarnished. Trump has warned Apple of a 25% tax if it manufactures its phones in India." This post alone garnered nearly 30,000 views and over 600 favorites, showing the scale of public frustration and the perception that India is being disrespected on the global stage. The shocking reality is that Apple's India strategy was built on the foundation of government incentives and support. India's production-linked incentive (PLI) scheme was specifically designed to attract companies like Apple, offering financial incentives for hitting production targets and creating jobs. Now Trump is essentially telling India that all of that investment and and planning was worthless because he can unilaterally decide where American companies should manufacture their products. The brutal truth is that Apple's expansion in India represents far more than just manufacturing. It's a symbol of India's emergence as a global technology hub. The company's market share in India has reached nearly 8%, and with plans to open retail stores in cities like Bengaluru and Pune, Apple was clearly betting big on India as both a manufacturing base and a consumer market. The infrastructure investments alone are staggering. New facilities include worker dormitories for 30,000 employees, complete with cafeterias, recreational facilities, and healthcare services. These aren't just factories. They're comprehensive industrial ecosystems designed to support large-scale, high-quality manufacturing operations. But Trump's threat reveals the devastating vulnerability of global supply chains to political whims. One man's tweet can potentially destroy years of careful planning, billions in investments, and hundreds of thousands of jobs. And the most infuriating part, Apple still hasn't said a word publicly to defend their Indian operations, their workers, or their manufacturing partners, who have invested billions based on Apple's commitments. The silent giant's impossible choice. The most devastating aspect of this entire saga isn't Trump's threats or even the economic chaos they've caused. It's Apple's deafening silence in the face of an existential crisis for their global manufacturing strategy. We're talking about a company that prides itself on taking stands on social issues, environmental causes, and human rights, yet when their own workers and partners are under attack, Tim Cook has gone completely radio silent. Apple has declined to comment when approached by multiple news outlets for a response to Trump's tariff threat, leaving markets, employees, and partners in complete uncertainty about the company's next moves. This isn't just corporate caution. This is cowardice on a massive scale. For a company that regularly issues statements on everything from climate change to social justice, their silence on an issue that directly affects hundreds of thousands of their workers is absolutely infuriating. The explosive reality is that Apple is trapped between impossible choices, and their silence reveals just how precarious their position has become. On one side, they have massive investments in India, with plans to produce 30 million iPhones in 2025, scaling up to over 60 million by 2026. On the other side, they face Trump's threat of a 25% tariff that could devastate their profit margins and force them to raise prices on American consumers. But here's where Apple's hypocrisy becomes absolutely infuriating. While staying silent publicly, Apple has privately assured Indian officials that India remains a key part of its global supply chain and that their manufacturing plans are intact. So they're willing to give private reassurances to protect their business relationships, but won't make a public stand to defend their strategy or their workers. It's the worst kind of corporate cowardice, having it both ways while taking responsibility for neither. The shocking timeline of Apple's recent commitments makes their silence even more outrageous. Just months ago, Apple announced a $500 billion investment over 4 years in the US, including hiring 20,000 people and building a new server factory in Texas. But this investment doesn't include iPhone production. It focuses on servers, data centers, and R&D operations. Trump is essentially saying that these investments aren't enough and demanding that Apple abandon their global manufacturing strategy entirely.
I speak to Tim Cook. I helped Tim Cook recently, and that whole business, I don't want to hurt anybody.
The brutal irony of Trump saying he doesn't want to hurt anybody while simultaneously threatening to destroy hundreds of thousands of jobs is staggering. But what's even more shocking is how this reveals the complete powerlessness of even the world's most valuable company when faced with political pressure. Apple, worth over $3 trillion, is being held hostage by political threats, and they don't even have the courage to defend their own business decisions publicly. Industry analysts are calling out the impossible economics of Trump's demands with increasing urgency. Dan Ives from Wedbush Securities has called the idea of US production a fairy tale, citing the time and expense involved. The numbers back this up. Estimates suggest it would take 10 years and cost over $30 billion to move just 10% of Apple's supply chain to the US. We're talking about a complete restructuring of global manufacturing that would take decades to implement and billions to execute. The devastating reality becomes clear when you look at the profit margins that Apple would be sacrificing. Apple currently makes about $450 profit per iPhone, but US production could drop that to just $60 per iPhone unless they drastically raise prices. We're talking about a company potentially having to choose between destroying their profitability or abandoning their entire diversification strategy that took years to develop. The explosive comparison with other tech companies makes Apple's silence even more damning. While Apple stays quiet, other companies facing similar pressures have at least acknowledged the challenges and attempted to communicate their strategies to stakeholders. Apple's complete radio silence suggests either paralysis in their decision-making or a calculated decision to avoid taking any public position that might anger either Trump or their Indian partners. But Trump's strategy goes even deeper than just targeting Apple. He's made it clear that this isn't just about one company. It's about fundamentally reshaping global manufacturing through threats and coercion. Trump has threatened similar tariffs on Samsung and anybody that makes that product, showing that he's willing to take on the entire global tech industry. This represents a fundamental shift in how trade policy is being used as a weapon against individual companies. The infuriating escalation continued with Trump's broader trade threats. He simultaneously threatened a 50% tariff on EU imports, showing that the Apple threat is part of a much larger trade war strategy. Apple finds itself caught in the crossfire of multiple trade disputes, with no clear path to compliance that wouldn't involve massive disruptions to their global operations. The explosive public reaction to Apple's silence has been sly and brutal across social media platforms. Users are calling out the company's hypocrisy, pointing out how Apple is quick to take stands on political issues when it's convenient, but goes silent when their own business interests are threatened. The contrast is stark. Apple will issue statements about environmental protection or social justice within hours, but they can't muster a single word to defend their manufacturing workers facing job losses. Market reactions tell the story of just how seriously investors are taking this threat. Apple's stock fell too, 5 to 3% immediately after Trump's announcement, and broader market indices also took a hit, with the S&P 500 down about 0.7% and European shares dropping more than 1.5%. This isn't just about Apple. It's about the stability of global supply chains in an era of increasing trade nationalism. The shocking timeline of events shows just how quickly this situation has escalated. Trump's threat came just days after he had expressed displeasure with Tim Cook during a business summit in Qatar on May 15th, and by May 23rd, he had formalized the threat with specific tariff percentages and implementation timelines. The speed of escalation suggests that Trump is serious about forcing Apple's hand, regardless of the economic consequences. The brutal mathematics of Apple's impossible choice become clearer when you examine the alternatives. Moving production to the US would require building entirely new facilities, training new workforces, and establishing new supplier relationships, a process that would take years and cost tens of billions. Meanwhile, accepting the 25% tariff would either force Apple to absorb massive losses or pass the cost on to consumers, potentially pricing themselves out of market competitiveness. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of this entire situation is what it reveals about the fragility of global capitalism in the face of political pressure. A single political figure can threaten to unravel years of strategic planning, billions in investments, and hundreds of thousands of jobs with nothing more than social media posts and public statements. The era of predictable trade policy and stable international business relationships appears to be over. The infuriating part is how Apple's silence abandons not just their Indian workers, but also sends a signal to every other country and partner that they're not willing to stand up for their commitments when faced with political pressure. This could have long-term consequences for Apple's ability to negotiate partnerships and investments in other countries, as governments may question whether Apple will defend their interests when challenged. Apple's response to this crisis will define not just their future manufacturing strategy, but their credibility as a company that claims to stand for something beyond profit margins. Will they cave to Trump's pressure and abandon their Indian partners? Will they find a way to navigate between competing political demands? Or will they finally break their silence and take a public stand for their business principles and their workers? The explosive truth is that there are no good options here. Every choice Apple makes will have devastating consequences for someone, whether it's their Indian workers, their American consumers, their shareholders, or their global manufacturing partners. And their continued silence only makes the situation worse, leaving everyone in limbo, while the company that claims to think different proves that when the pressure is on, they think exactly like every other corporation. Profits first, principles second. The most infuriating development in this entire saga is that Apple's manufacturing plans in India were supposed to represent a success story of diversification and resilience. The company had successfully navigated away from overdependence on China, built relationships with new partners, created hundreds of thousands of jobs, and established a manufacturing base that could serve global markets. Now all of that is threatened by political whims, and Apple doesn't even have the courage to defend their own achievements. What happens next will determine whether Apple emerges from this crisis stronger, or whether Trump's tariff threats succeed in fundamentally reshaping how global tech companies approach manufacturing. But one thing is certain: the era of quiet corporate diplomacy is over, and companies can no longer stay silent when their strategies are under political attack. The most infuriating part of all, we're still waiting for Apple to say literally anything publicly about defending the hundreds of thousands of workers whose livelihoods hang in the balance. Until Apple breaks this silence, we're led to wonder what they'll do next, if Trump will go through with his tariff threats, and how this whole drama will affect the tech giant. If you enjoyed this video, click on the ones showing on your screen to enjoy more.
Tariffs raise prices. You can't impose tariffs and lower prices at the same time.
Imagine paying $18 for that salmon fillet that cost $13 last month, or watching your morning coffee jump by $2 per bag. With new tariffs hitting up to 46% on seafood from Vietnam, and even your Mexican tomatoes facing an 18% hike, your grocery bill is about to get shocking. Here are the top 12 foods you should buy now before prices potentially double by June. Seafood. First on our list, seafood. This might be the category hit hardest by the new tariffs, and here's why. Did you know that the US imports up to 85% of its seafood? That's right, the vast majority of fish and shellfish on American tables comes from overseas. But what few people realize is just how dependent we are on countries facing the steepest tariffs. Vietnam, a major seafood supplier to the US, is now subject to a staggering 46% tariff. Other significant sources like Chile face 10% tariffs, while Indonesia faces 32% and India 26%. The impact is already starting to surface. Seafood importers are scrambling to secure inventory before the full effect of these tariffs hits. Industry analysts predict shortages of popular items like shrimp, tilapia, and frozen fish fillets. Some specialty seafood items could disappear from grocery stores entirely as importers decide certain products are no longer profitable to bring in. This translates to some serious sticker shock. That salmon fillet you paid $12, $99 per pound for last month? Don't be surprised if it's $18 or more by June. Budget-friendly options like frozen tilapia and shrimp staples for many working families deliveries could see some of the steepest increases. And who bears the brunt of these increases? It's not just seafood lovers. Think about the thousands of restaurant workers whose livelihoods depend on affordable seafood. Many small coastal restaurants are already struggling with rising costs, and these tariffs could force menu prices up by 15 to 20% or more, driving away customers and threatening jobs. Should families already struggling with inflation now have to choose between nutritious seafood and other necessities? If seafood prices jump this dramatically, what does that mean for people who are trying to maintain healthy diets on tight budgets? And it's not just seafood feeling the impact. That morning cup of joe you rely on to start your day, it's about to hit your wallet even harder. Coffee. Next up is a morning essential for millions. Coffee. That daily cup of joe you rely on, it's about to get a lot more expensive, and you should consider stocking up now. What many people don't realize is that 99% of coffee consumed in the US is imported, primarily from countries in Latin America. Brazil, which supplies a significant portion of America's coffee beans, faces a 10% tariff, while Colombia, another major supplier, is also subject to tariffs.
We import stuff from other countries because we don't grow much of it here. Like coffee, for example.
The coffee supply chain is particularly vulnerable to price increases because it's already been dealing with climate-related challenges affecting harvests. Add tariffs to that equation, and we're looking at a perfect storm for coffee lovers. Industry experts are warning that both supermarket coffee and your favorite cafe drinks will see price hikes. Major coffee chains are already preparing customers for increases. For grocery store coffee, expect to pay anywhere from 50 cents to $2 more per bag, depending on the brand and origin. But the impact extends far beyond your personal budget. Consider the thousands of independent coffee shops across America, small businesses that operate on razor-thin margins. Many of these shops are still recovering from pandemic-related losses, and now they face the impossible choice of raising prices and potentially losing customers, or absorbing costs they simply can't afford. For the baristas and staff who rely on these businesses for their livelihoods, these tariffs could mean reduced hours or even lost jobs. And in communities where the local coffee shop serves as a gathering place and economic anchor, the ripple effects could be substantial. If you're a coffee drinker, consider purchasing an extra bag or two of your favorite beans now. Properly stored, coffee can maintain quality for several months, especially if frozen. While your morning brew might cost more, the evening glass of wine you enjoy to unwind could also leave your wallet feeling lighter. Wine. Third on our list is wine, a category that's about to see some significant price increases, particularly for imported varieties. This might not be a daily essential for everyone, but for many Americans who enjoy an occasional glass with dinner or who celebrate special occasions with a nice bottle, the impact will be noticeable. Wines from Europe, including those from France, Italy, and Spain, now face 20% tariffs, while wines from Australia and New Zealand are subject to 10% tariffs. These countries represent the majority of wine imports to the United States. What many wine enthusiasts don't realize is how quickly these tariffs will affect retail prices. Unlike some other products where retailers might absorb costs temporarily, wine is typically marked up based on the landed cost, meaning tariffs translate almost directly to higher shelf prices. Industry analysts predict price increases of at least 15 to 25% for European wines by early summer. That $15 bottle of Spanish Red could soon cost $18.19, while higher-end wines could see even steeper dollar increases. The timing is particularly unfortunate for small wine shops and distributors across America. These businesses often operate with limited capital and cannot afford to stock up significantly ahead of price increases. Many are still recovering from pandemic-related losses and supply chain disruptions that have plagued the industry for years. For consumers, especially those on fixed incomes who enjoy an occasional glass of imported wine, these price increases represent yet another squeeze on discretionary spending. And for restaurants already struggling with food inflation, wine list prices will likely increase, potentially affecting sales and server tips. What does it mean when even small pleasures become increasingly unaffordable? If you have upcoming celebrations or enjoy specific imported wines regularly, purchasing a few extra bottles now could save you considerable money in the coming months. Wine isn't the only indulgence facing steep increases. That healthy handful of nuts you snack on, they're about to cost you a lot more crunch for your buck. Nuts. Fourth on our list, nuts, a nutritious snack and cooking ingredient that's about to get much more expensive. While nuts may seem like a small part of your grocery budget, the price increases coming could surprise you, especially if you regularly purchase certain varieties. The majority of popular nuts like cashews, macadamias, and even some almonds are imported, often from countries facing significant tariffs. Vietnam, which supplies many of the cashews found in American stores, now faces a steep 46% tariff. India, another major nut supplier, faces a 26% tariff. The impact is already being felt throughout the supply chain. Importers report that wholesale prices for cashews have jumped 15 to 20% since the tariff announcements, with further increases expected once current inventories are depleted. By June, consumers could see cashew prices 30 to 40% higher than they were at the beginning of the year. People who rely on nuts as a protein source or healthy snack option, these increases present a real budget challenge. A 1-pound bag of cashews that cost $8.99 in January could potentially cost $12 or more by summer. Mixed nuts and specialty options like macadamias could see even higher percentage increases. The price hikes could be particularly difficult for small businesses like bakeries, ice cream shops, and specialty food producers who use nuts as ingredients. Many of these small operations cannot easily absorb significant cost increases or pass them on to customers without risking sales declines. And for health-conscious consumers and those with dietary restrictions who rely on nuts as a staple protein source, these price increases could force difficult nutritional compromises. Is it reasonable to expect families to sacrifice healthy food options because of trade policies?
It's a self-inflicted economic crisis, and it's worse than the worst-case scenario most experts feared.
If nuts are a regular part of your diet or cooking, consider purchasing shelf-stable varieties now. Properly stored in airtight containers in a cool, dry place, most nuts will maintain quality for 6-12 months, and they can be frozen for even longer storage. Speaking of imported foods that define authentic flavors, European cheeses are facing a perfect storm of tariff troubles that could transform them from everyday pleasures to occasional luxuries. Cheese. Fifth on our list is cheese. Particularly affected will be imported varieties like Parmigiano Reggiano, Brie, Gouda, and other European favorites, which now face 20% tariffs from countries like Italy, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. The authentic imported cheeses aren't just luxury items, they're staples in many kitchens, especially among the country's diverse ethnic communities. These cheeses often have protected designation status, meaning they cannot be legally produced elsewhere. There's simply no American substitute for true Parmigiano Reggiano or authentic Manchego. The tariff impact is expected to be significant. Industry experts predict that by June, consumers could see price increases of 15 to 25% on imported European cheeses. That wedge of Parmigiano Reggiano that currently costs $15 could soon be $18 or more. For specialty cheese shops, these increases represent an existential threat to their business model, but the consequences extend beyond just higher prices for cheese enthusiasts. The ripple effects on restaurants, particularly those specializing in Italian, French, or Mediterranean cuisine. Many of these establishments, often small, family-owned businesses, rely on authentic imported cheeses as fundamental ingredients. They now face the impossible choice of raising menu prices, compromising on quality, or absorbing costs they cannot afford. People with European heritage who use specific cheeses in traditional recipes, these tariffs add yet another financial barrier to maintaining cultural food traditions. And for the thousands of specialty food store employees and cheesemongers whose livelihoods depend on selling these products, the reduced sales volumes could mean fewer work hours or even job losses. Is preserving culinary traditions worth protecting? Should access to authentic cultural foods be limited by trade policies? Start buying extra now. Most hard cheeses will keep for months in the refrigerator when properly wrapped, and many can be frozen for even longer storage. If cheese prices have you concerned, consider what's happening to that Mediterranean staple you drizzle over nearly everything. Olive oil is next on our warning list. Olive oil. Sixth on our list is olive oil, a kitchen essential that's already experienced price volatility and is now set to become even more expensive. If you cook regularly, this is one item you'll definitely want to stock up on before prices climb higher. Approximately 95% of olive oil consumed in the United States is imported, primarily from European countries including Spain, Italy, and Greece, all now subject to 20% tariffs. Even non-European sources like Tunisia face tariffs of at least 10%. The timing couldn't be worse. Olive oil prices were already elevated due to drought conditions affecting production in Spain, the world's largest producer. Industry analysts now predict that by June, consumers could see olive oil prices 25 to 35% higher than they were at the beginning of the year. For practical shoppers, this means that 500 milliliters bottle of extra virgin olive oil that cost $12 in January could soon cost $15-16 or more. Premium and organic varieties could see even steeper increases.
You can argue that targeted tariffs are worth it for some other policy goal, but you can't argue that they magically bring prices down.
The impact will be particularly severe for Mediterranean restaurants and specialty food producers who use olive oil as a primary ingredient. Many of these businesses are small, family-owned operations that cannot easily absorb such significant cost increases. Some restaurant owners report that olive oil represents 5 to 8% of their total food costs, a percentage that could rise dramatically with these tariffs. For health-conscious consumers who use olive oil for its documented health benefits, these price increases could force difficult compromises. And for Americans with Mediterranean heritage who use olive oil daily as part of their traditional diet, these tariffs represent yet another financial barrier to maintaining cultural food traditions. Is it reasonable that a basic healthy cooking ingredient like an olive oil becomes increasingly unaffordable? How do people have to compromise on the quality of such a fundamental food staple? Now is the time to purchase extra bottles. Properly stored in a cool, dark place, good quality olive oil will maintain its characteristics for 24 months after bottling. Check the harvest or Best By date and purchase accordingly. From savory to sweet, chocolate lovers need to pay special attention to what's coming next, as this beloved treat faces a double hit of challenges. Chocolate. Seventh on our list is chocolate, a beloved treat that's about to become more expensive due to a perfect storm of challenges. If you have a sweet tooth or regularly bake with chocolate, you'll want to pay close attention. Cocoa beans, the primary ingredient in chocolate, are almost entirely imported, mainly from West African countries like the Ivory Coast, which now faces a 21% tariff. Ecuador, another significant source, faces a 10% tariff. But tariffs are just one part of the problem. Cocoa prices were already at record highs due to poor harvests and disease affecting cacao trees. Add the new tariffs, and chocolate manufacturers are facing unprecedented cost pressures from multiple directions. Industry analysts predict that by June, consumers could see chocolate prices 20 to 30% higher than they were at the beginning of the year. That $3 chocolate bar could soon cost $3.60 or more, while premium chocolates could see even steeper increases. Baking chocolate, chocolate chips, and cocoa powder will all be affected. The timing is particularly challenging for small chocolate makers and bakeries. These artisanal businesses operate on narrow margins and often cannot afford to stock up significantly ahead of price increases. Many have already weathered multiple cocoa price hikes in recent years and have limited capacity to absorb further increases without raising prices to consumers. For children, these increases could make a simple pleasure increasingly unaffordable. And for the thousands of workers in chocolate shops, bakeries, and specialty food stores, reduced sales volumes could mean fewer work hours or even job losses. Is it fair that a small joy like chocolate becomes less accessible to ordinary Americans? If chocolate is your regular purchase, buy extra now, especially baking chocolate, cocoa powder, and chocolate chips, which have a long shelf life when properly stored. Most chocolate products will keep for 6, 12 months or longer if stored in a cool, dry place. While chocolate might seem like a luxury to some, our next item is a baking essential that's about to see one of the largest percentage increases of any food on our list. Vanilla. 8th on our list is vanilla, an ingredient that may seem minor, but could see one of the largest percentage price increases of any food item. If you bake regularly or enjoy vanilla-flavored products, you should know what's coming. Genuine vanilla comes primarily from Madagascar, which produces over 80% of the world's supply. With potential tariff increases from 10% to 47% on vanilla from Madagascar, this baking staple is poised for a significant price shock. The vanilla supply chain was already fragile. Real vanilla is labor-intensive to produce, requiring hand pollination and a lengthy curing process. The global market has experienced extreme volatility in recent years due to cyclones and other challenges affecting Madagascar's production. Industry experts predict that by June, consumers could see pure vanilla extract prices 30 to 40% higher than current levels. That small 2-ounce bottle of pure vanilla extract that currently costs $8.10 could soon cost $11.14 or more. Vanilla beans could become prohibitively expensive for average consumers. The impact extends far beyond home bakers. Consider the thousands of small bakeries, ice cream shops, and specialty food producers across America who rely on vanilla as a fundamental ingredient. These small businesses, many still recovering from pandemic-related losses, now face difficult choices: raise prices, change recipes, or absorb costs they simply cannot afford. People who enjoy baking together or who have special recipes that call for real vanilla, these price increases represent yet another financial barrier to maintaining cherished traditions. And for those with dietary restrictions who rely on home baking with quality ingredients, fewer affordable options will be available. Is it reasonable that simple baking ingredients become luxury items? Purchase extra pure vanilla extract now, properly stored in a cool, dark place. It will maintain its quality for 2, 3 years, or even longer. While imitation vanilla is less affected by these tariffs, the flavor difference is significant to many bakers. Vanilla's steep price climb is just the beginning of flavor challenges. Your entire spice cabinet is about to become significantly more expensive to maintain. Spices. 9th on our list are spices, the flavor foundations that define the cuisines many love. While these might seem like small purchases, the coming price increases could significantly impact your grocery budget and cooking options. What many home cooks don't realize is that approximately 80% of spices used in the United States are imported, primarily from countries now facing substantial tariffs. India, a major spice producer, faces a 26% tariff, while Indonesia faces 32%, and Vietnam a steep 46%. Common spices expected to see significant price increases include black pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, turmeric, and vanilla. Many of these spices cannot be commercially grown in the US due to climate requirements, meaning there are few domestic alternatives. Industry analysts predict that by June, consumers could see spice prices 15 to 25% higher than current levels, with some specialty spices potentially seeing even larger increases. That jar of cinnamon that costs $4 today could soon be $5, while more expensive spices like saffron could see dollar increases in the double digits. The timing is particularly challenging for small ethnic grocers and specialty spice shops across America. These businesses often operate with limited capital and serve specific community needs. Many are family-owned operations that cannot afford to stock up significantly ahead of price increases or easily pass costs to price-sensitive customers. For immigrant families who use specific spices to maintain their cultural food traditions, these tariffs add yet another financial barrier to preserving heritage. And for Americans who have embraced diverse cuisines in their home cooking, exploring global flavors could become increasingly costly. Now is an excellent time to inventory your spice rack and purchase items you use frequently.
Think about everything you need for the next 6 months. Buy it now, if you can afford it. It may save you hundreds, if not thousands later.
Properly stored in airtight containers away from heat and light, whole spices will maintain their quality for 2-3 years, while ground spices generally stay fresh for 1-2 years. While spices might seem like small purchases, the fresh produce section, where health-conscious shoppers spend a significant portion of their grocery budget, isn't immune to these tariff effects. Fresh produce. 10th on our list is fresh produce, a category essential for healthy eating that could soon see significant price increases, particularly for off-season fruits and vegetables. The United States relies heavily on imports for many fruits and vegetables, especially during winter months. Countries like Peru, Guatemala, and Costa Rica, all now facing 10% tariffs, supply significant amounts of America's bananas, berries, melons, and tropical fruits. The impact of these tariffs is complicated by several factors. Fresh produce has a short shelf life, meaning retailers cannot stock up far in advance. Additionally, growing seasons and weather conditions already create natural price volatility for these products. Industry experts predict that by June, consumers could see imported fruit prices 10 to 15% higher than usual seasonal levels. Items like berries, grapes, and tropical fruits could see the most significant increases. For example, that $5 container of blueberries could soon cost $5.50, $5.75 or more. The timing is particularly challenging for small grocers and produce markets serving low-income communities. These businesses operate on extremely thin margins and often cannot absorb significant cost increases without raising prices to customers who can least afford it. Is it reasonable to expect parents to compromise on the quality of food they provide their children? While you cannot stock up on most fresh produce long-term, consider buying frozen fruits and vegetables now. Properly stored in your freezer, these will maintain nutritional value for 8-12 months.
Buy those now and freeze them. They last a long time in there.
Also, plan to take advantage of local growing seasons in the coming months when domestic produce is typically more affordable. From plant-based nutrition to protein essentials, meat prices were already climbing due to domestic challenges, and now tariffs are adding fuel to that financial fire. Meat. 11th on our list is meat, a protein staple in many households that's expected to see noticeable price increases by June. While the U.S. produces most of its own meat, import tariffs will still affect prices in ways many consumers don't anticipate.
Items to buy now. Meats. The U.S. produces a good amount of meat, actually, but also imports a lot of it from Argentina and Australia, both facing stiff tariffs.
Approximately 90% of beef consumed in the U.S. is domestically produced. Important supplemental supplies come from countries like Australia and New Zealand, both now facing 10% tariffs. These imports help balance seasonal domestic production and provide specific cuts in high demand. The impact is expected to be significant for several reasons. First, the U.S. cattle herd is at its smallest size since 1951, already creating upward pressure on beef prices. Second, as imported beef becomes more expensive, domestic producers gain pricing power in the market. Finally, competition for available meat supplies intensifies as retailers and restaurants scramble to secure inventory. Industry analysts predict that by June, consumers could see beef prices 10 to 15% higher than they were at the beginning of the year, with certain popular cuts potentially seeing larger increases. That pound of ground beef, currently costing $5.99, could soon be $6.50, $7 or more, while steaks and roasts could see even steeper increases. The timing is particularly challenging for restaurants, especially those specializing in burgers and steaks. These businesses have already weathered significant food inflation in recent years and have limited capacity to absorb further increases without raising menu prices. These increases could force difficult dietary changes. And for the millions of people who rely on ground beef as an affordable protein option, fewer budget-friendly alternatives will be available. Purchase extra now and freeze it. Properly wrapped, beef will maintain quality in the freezer for 6-12 months depending on the cut. Also, explore alternative protein sources like chicken, which may be less affected by import tariffs, and plant-based proteins. As concerning as meat prices are, they might not see the most dramatic increases on this list. That distinction goes to a versatile kitchen staple that appears in countless family favorites: tomatoes. Last but certainly not least on our list, tomatoes, a versatile ingredient used in countless dishes that could see some of the most dramatic price increases of any food item. If pasta sauce, salsa, or fresh tomatoes are staples in your kitchen, you need to know what's coming. Mexico supplies the majority of tomatoes consumed in the US, especially during winter months. With a 17.9% tariff on Mexican tomatoes, your pizza, pasta sauce, and salads are about to get significantly more expensive. The impact could be severe, with industry experts predicting tomato price increases of up to a staggering 50% by June. That package of Roma tomatoes currently costing $3.99 could soon be $5.99 or more. Canned tomatoes, tomato paste, and prepared sauces will also see price increases as current inventories are depleted. It is challenging for restaurants, especially pizzerias and Italian eateries that use tomatoes as a foundation ingredient. These businesses, many still recovering from pandemic-related losses, now face the impossible choice of raising menu prices, changing recipes, or absorbing costs they simply cannot afford. Families who cook at home to save money, these increases make budget meal planning more difficult. Pasta with tomato sauce, long a budget-friendly dinner option, becomes less economical. And for the millions of Americans who rely on tomato-based products as affordable ways to add nutrition and flavor to meals, fewer alternatives will be available. Stock up now, especially on canned tomatoes, tomato paste, and jarred sauces, which have a shelf life of 18 months. While you cannot store fresh tomatoes long-term, properly canned and preserved tomato products maintain their nutritional value and flavor. Tariffs are expected to have a significant impact on food prices across numerous categories, while expert analyses suggest an overall food price increase of 1.6% to 2.8% from all 2025 tariffs. Certain items like tomatoes could see increases of up to 100%. Let's recap the 12 foods most likely to see significant price increases by June. 1. Seafood, especially from Vietnam, 46% tariff. 2. Coffee, with 99% imported, mostly from tariffed countries. 3. Wine, particularly European varieties, facing 20% tariffs. 4. Nuts, with cashews from Vietnam facing 46% tariffs. 5. Cheese imported varieties from Europe facing 20% tariffs. 6. Olive oil, already expensive and facing 20% tariffs from Europe. 7. Chocolate with cocoa from Ivory Coast facing 21% tariffs. 8. Vanilla potentially facing tariffs up to 47% from Madagascar. 9. Spices, with major suppliers facing tariffs of 26 to 46%. 10. Fresh produce, particularly off-season and tropical fruits. 11. Meat, with supplemental supplies facing 10% tariffs. 12. Tomatoes, with Mexican imports facing a 17.9% tariff. While not all these foods will literally double in price by June, the increases will be substantial enough to impact household budgets. For a family spending $1,000 monthly on groceries, these tariff-related increases could add $30.80 or more to monthly food costs, and that's on top of regular inflation. So what should you do? Consider strategically purchasing non-perishable items now. Canned tomatoes, coffee, spices, olive oil, and other shelf-stable foods with long storage lives. For perishables like meats, cheese, and some produce, freezing is an option for extended storage.
If you act now, you can actually grab them before the new pricing kicks in.
This isn't about panic buying or hoarding. It's about making informed decisions to protect your family's budget in uncertain times. By understanding which foods are most vulnerable to price increases and taking measured steps now, you can help minimize the impact of these tariffs on your household finances. Well, that's it for this video. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe and click on any of the cards on your screen right now to keep the fun going.